To date, our victim advocate, Melody, has received 38 inquiries. She's documenting each story and is committed to advocating on their behalf. The inquiries are not all unique or separate, but they do represent allegations, disclosures, and concerns relating primarily to clergy sexual misconduct, harassment, and abuse by Kee Naidu, Dave Churchill, Bruxy Cavey, and Tim Day. The cases of Kee Naidu and Dave Churchill have gone to court and convictions were laid. And as you're aware, we're currently underway with 2 investigations where Bruxy Cavey and Tim Day have been named. Additional disclosures have been brought to Melody where previous leaders and staff engaged in sexual misconduct, adultery, and troubling emotional abuse. In almost all of the responses, individuals have suffered spiritual harm. We've also heard stories of brave individuals who have tried to address the culture of immorality in the past, and they felt shut down and alienated by the church. Each story we've read causes us deep grief, but we know it's only a fraction of the pain that the victims, both men and women, have experienced. These aren't new or recent incidences of harm, and they do come as a surprise to the overseers and to many in this church family. We're thankful that for many of us, this hasn't been our experience of the church, but that doesn't mean that any of us can afford to ignore them. I'll read you a statement from one of the reports. I would like for the current overseers to acknowledge and take accountability for what the church has done. Just because the current overseers were not around or not involved in abuse does not mean they are absolved. They represent the church. She's right. We own this. Another victim shared a quotation by Julie Gemstone that resonated with her and how it speaks to the grief, pain, and darkness of clergy abuse. What once was a place of trust, honor, and loyalty, a place for the heart and soul to call home, the place where everything wrong was becoming right, in this place, the most treasonous of all treasons was committed against an innocent and unsuspecting child of God. What once was a place of respite became a place of hypervigilance. Of safety became the gauntlet of danger. What once held hope now held sickness and disease. What once made sense became an unsolvable puzzle. What once held innocence now accused of guilt and shame. This is not a fluke, a fall, or a human mistake. This was an act of aggression perpetrated person after person after person. To those who are still in the fog of trauma caused by confusing and disorienting acts done by the church, you are not alone. We are deeply sorry for the abuse and harm that has occurred, be it sexual, emotional, or spiritual in our church family. We are deeply sorry for how many of these stories have been handled in the past. We continue to be humbled to now be the stewards of those stories. We formed a board subcommittee to respond to each and every inquiry and disclosure. We're trying to respond to each inquiry in a timely way, but it's been challenging. And I want to name that we're doing it slower than we expected and hoped. As the Victim Advocacy Committee, we originally committed to responding to each request within 30 days, and we haven't been able to meet that consistently. The victims who have submitted reports ask good questions about accountability and an accounting of what happened and why decisions were made. These are fair and reasonable questions, and we want to know the answers too. But practically speaking, it's time-consuming for a small group of volunteers, and we're learning as we go. I know that some of you question how quickly we move to an investigation, and others wonder why we aren't telling you more about every report. What I can tell you is that we are trying to tread carefully and faithfully. We're also prayerfully seeking understanding and not treating these stories as separate and unique, distinct situations, but as a narrative that unfortunately is woven through our story as a church. Of course, you want to know how we're going to make sure this never happens again. You want reassurance that we're going to handle this right. Well, one subcommittee of the board is working on responses to the inquiries. Another subcommittee is updating our policies, ensuring there are clear guidelines for accountability, supervision, implementing best practices that will protect. We're working on training plans, hiring, and volunteer policies. I can assure you that the overseers and senior leadership are committed to turn the lights on and handle this right. I can even give you the practical steps we're doing that we're working on, but I can't promise you that this will get handled right. Stay with me. I can tell you one trend we've identified is a skew to prioritizing the care and well-being of offenders over victims. Yes, a skew to prioritizing the care and well-being of offenders over victims. There are multiple stories of victims who felt shamed and rejected by the church, while the offender was supported through so-called restoration.